I asked Colin once, "Why did you settle in the United States?" His answer was candid as usual. "Robert, don't you know I am a Whig? Nowadays, where else can a Whig go?" It's true that at one time, Colin's only readings seemed to be from that eminent Whig, Lord Chesterfield, from his letters to his son. He was also word perfect in much of Hilaire Belloc, a more Catholic author, especially the one that begins, "Lord Lundy from his earliest years was far too freely moved to tears." Only last year he was invigorated by the news that a woman wishing to fraternize with the lions in Washington Zoo had climbed fences and crossed ha-has only to end up being eaten. A fate that Hilaire Belloc would well have made into a moral tale. When I entered the Liverpool School of Architecture, I came to his attention through my sketch design. Sketch design happened every other Tuesday. On these occasions, a band of sophisticated sophomores came around to check out the freshmen, and I was picked out for my brevity and wit. What for me was tryout, done out of pure naivety, for Colin was evidence of independent thinking. Subsequently, he was apt to attribute to me intentions far beyond my means. I think perhaps that Colin used flattery not for his own advantage, but to improve his circle of friends. He soon converted me to Corbe, but later preferred to think that it was I who did that to him, since he said it gave him a lot of grief. I was converted to Corbe in my second year. They failed me for doing they nearly failed me for doing white-walled Richard Meyer stuff in my sophomore year. Then Colin went in the army, and while training in the paratroopers, met Jim Sterling, with momentous consequences for the future of British architecture. I took advantage of his absence to modify my style in the direction of Eric Mendelsohn and got through the year successfully. But I was careful not to let Colin see the results. Colin's approval was important to me. His values were peerless. In one of his letters received at that time, his description of the army barracks as so long that the curvature of the earth effectively conceals the other end seemed to me to be not merely hyperbole, but a careful examination of the evidence, suggesting the coming transition from architect to critic. In another of his letters, written from Yale, so it must have been around 1950-51, begins, "Dear Robert, this is a business note. I want $150 towards an automobile, and I need it quick. There's a desperate girl here going over to London who will let me have $150 now if I let her have £50 in London, right immediately." Later, the style became more Italianate, as in, "Caro il mio Roberto, I send you a Xerox copy of a letter of yours that I found inside a dilapidated copy of Byron's works. By now, it is surely an historical item. It is almost 55 years old, and just think of that." And then it ends, "Ti saluto con abbraccio fervente." Colin always spoke with a touch of irony, with complete knowingness. His awareness was total, yet his feelings were real and never affected. The insistence on seeing architecture as a unique intersection of thought and feeling gave his criticism an indubitably personal note. His words were persuasive because he always addressed you directly, privately. This quality, translated into his written texts, allowed him to make insinuations that were compulsive without ever asserting conclusions that went beyond the evidence. No wonder that he influenced so dramatically the teaching of architecture in the States by linking studio to history and theory. Colin visited us once in London at a time when I was struggling with 3 children on an inadequate income. Looking around my improvised living room, he protested, "Robert, how can you live in such squalor?" But Colin, it's just temporary. My dear Robert, I was under the impression that life was temporary.